The Olympic Games stretch back to ancient Greece, where they were initially celebrated in 776 BCE in Olympia, a sanctuary site for Zeus. These early games were part of a religious festival held every 4 years and included a range of events such as running races, wrestling, boxing, chariot racing, and pentathlon, which combined 5 different sports. The ancient Olympics were integral to Greek culture and society, serving as both a celebration of athletic prowess and a religious ritual honoring Zeus. The athletes who competed in these early games did so naked, and the events were held in a large open-air stadium. Victors were awarded olive wreaths, and their achievements were celebrated in poems and statues. The games were not just about physical competition but also served to foster a sense of unity among the Greek city-states, even during times of conflict. The Olympic truce, or ekakyria, was a sacred agreement to cease hostilities and allow safe passage for athletes and spectators traveling to the games. However, as the Roman Empire expanded, the original spirit of the Olympics began to wane. By 393 CE, Emperor Theodosius I, aiming to suppress pagan practices, abolished the Olympic Games, and the site of Olympia fell into neglect. The Games remained dormant for over a millennium, with only occasional references in literature and art. The revival of the Olympics began in the late 19th century, largely due to the efforts of Pierre de Coubertin, a French educator and historian who was inspired by the ancient Greek tradition and the idea of promoting international peace and unity through sport. In 1894, de Coubertin organized a congress in Paris that led to the re-establishment of the Olympic Games. The International Olympic Committee, IOC, was formed, and the first modern Olympics were scheduled to take place in Athens in 1896. The 1896 Athens Games were a modest affair compared to their ancient predecessors. With 13 nations participating, the Games featured 43 events across 9 sports, including athletics, cycling, fencing, gymnastics, shooting, swimming, tennis, weightlifting, and wrestling. The Games were a resounding success and provided a foundation for future Olympiads. Greek athletes, including the marathon runner Spiridon Lewis, who won the first modern marathon, became national heroes. The success of the 1896 Games was followed by the 1900 Paris Olympics, which were the first to include female competitors. The Paris Games also marked the inclusion of new sports, such as tennis and golf, which broadened the scope of the event. The Paris Games were notable for their lack of organization and confusion, but they paved the way for further development. The early 20th century saw the Olympics evolving in scope and scale. The 1904 St. Louis Games, held in the United States, were marked by their inclusion of several new sports and were notable for the introduction of the first American football team. However, they were overshadowed by the 1906 Intercalated Games held in Athens, which were not officially recognized by the IOC but are sometimes considered a continuation of the Olympics. These games saw increased international participation and the introduction of new events. The 1912 Stockholm Olympics were significant for several reasons. They were the first to include decathlon and pentathlon, and they saw the emergence of new stars like Jim Thorpe, an American athlete who won gold in both events. The Games were also notable for the introduction of the modern Olympic medal design, which has remained largely unchanged. The impact of World War I led to the cancellation of the 1916 Berlin Olympics. The Games resumed in 1920 in Antwerp, Belgium, where they were held under the shadow of the recent war. The 1920 Games were notable for the establishment of the Olympic flag, which features the 5 interlocking rings symbolizing the unity of the 5 continents. The 1924 Paris Olympics introduced the Winter Games, which were held separately from the Summer Olympics. This new addition included sports such as skiing, ice hockey, and figure skating. The idea of having separate Winter Games was well received and became a permanent fixture in the Olympic calendar. The 1936 Berlin Olympics, under the regime of Adolf Hitler, were marred by political tensions and propaganda. Despite this, the Games are remembered for the remarkable achievements of African-American athlete Jesse Owens, who won 4 gold medals and challenged the racial ideologies promoted by the Nazi regime. The Berlin Olympics were also notable for the introduction of television broadcasting, which helped popularize the Games worldwide. World War II led to the cancellation of the 1940 and 1944 Olympics. However, the Games resumed in 1948 in London, in what was known as the Austerity Games, due to the post-war economic conditions. The London Games were significant for their return to peace and international cooperation, and they were characterized by the participation of athletes from countries previously involved in the conflict. The 1952 Helsinki Olympics were the first to be held in a neutral country and saw the participation of the Soviet Union, marking the beginning of the Cold War influence on the Games. The 1950s and 1960s saw the Olympics growing in global significance, with the addition of new sports and the participation of more countries. The 1980 Moscow Olympics and the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics were both affected by geopolitical tensions. The 1980 Games were boycotted by the United States and several other countries in protest of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. In contrast, the 1984 Games saw a Soviet-led boycott in retaliation. Despite these disruptions, the Games continued to evolve, with increased commercial sponsorship and media coverage.